You're living a miserable life because of me. No, mother, I am content. There is nothing to forgive. Oh yeah? Then why are you f***ing your husband's son? Pardon? The first thing she does is starts masturbating, with Bjorn still sleeping in the same tent. She's lying! She's lying! She's lying! So after Freya gets high on shrooms and kills a cow, there's two of them. Interrogate both. There's two. Bjorn is a massive bitch. Okay, I am nervous for this one. This is something very new to me. So nervous that I've been stalling for the past 2 hours. I don't know why I'm so nervous. Like, I was staring at the record button for like 10 minutes before I finally had the courage to hit it. To those who don't know, I mainly do manga related content on this channel. I mainly live stream, go live here on YouTube and just read whatever manga I'm reading. Try to break it down as I'm reading the chapters, give my opinions on it, as Chad is reading along with me. So I decided to do something different. For the past few years, I've been seeing more and more Booktube related content creators starting One Piece and seeing how much they actually love actually ended up loving One Piece. So I decided to do the opposite. So me, One Piece fan, will be reading A Fate Inked in Blood. So I had certain plans for this video. So I bought the book, and with it I bought these stickers, so I could like mark the pages and moments that I for whatever reason. So like there's four colors. So red obviously is for the parts I don't like, green for the parts I do like, blue for just things I think is worth remembering, and yellow for just anything maybe I just find questionable, or something I find funny, or just anything. By the halfway point of the story, so like when I was halfway through, I had a total of 24 stickers, 4 of which were red, 4 were green, 8 were blue, and 8 were yellow. By that I was like, okay, this is very manageable. So if by the end of the story, at worst, it should just a little bit more than double. But no, the second half alone more than doubled. The second half alone had a total of 62 stickers, 11 of which are yellow, another 11 blue, 7 were green, and 33 were red, which leads to a total, hold up, let me scroll down a bit, which leads to a total of 86, of which are 19 yellow, 19 blue, 11 green, and 37 red. Now, that is not good. Because I had high hopes when or at least not very high hopes, but as the story was building up, I was like, okay, I can see where the story is going, and it should be interesting enough to read. So I just kept reading, and I was actually somewhat engaged and in the characters to a certain extent. But this is what it looks like now. So you can see the first half over here, not that many. And then by the last half, it's just almost all of them are red. And the last 30 pages, I didn't even bother to sticker because I was running out of red stickers. And I was like, no, this is not manageable. Okay, let's pull back a little bit. I'm going to break the entire story down. I'm going to try not to make it too long. This is my first time doing this, so I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to be able to dissect this properly. So I'm going to probably make a lot of mistakes in terms of breaking it down properly in video format. So this will, for me, also will be a learning moment. Okay, so first off, let's start with the cast. The main cast specifically. So the main character is called Freya. She's a young adult female character. I would say somewhere between 20 and 25. I don't really recall an age being specified for her. She was gifted a drop of blood from the goddess Lean. Goddess Lean, which is a shield maiden, and she can make shields invincible and just deflect whatever attack comes towards her, and just shoot it back essentially. Cool ability. I dig that. I like that ability a lot. And then we have Vragi, which is Freya's first asshole husband, who can control fish, and he was gifted a drop of blood from whatever god. I don't remember his name, and I don't really bother because he dies very early on. He was gifted blood from a god who can control fish, and he gained a high status in the village because he was able to feed the village with fish. And then we move on to Snorri, which is Freya's second asshole husband, and his aim is to essentially become king of the entirety of Skaland, which is the entire region or country or land that they live in. Then we have Bjorn, who is Snorri's son, the love interest of Freya, and has the blood of Tyr, the son of God, and he can summon a flame axe, which is also cool. I also dig that. Then we have 2 more left, which is Ylva. Ylva is Snorri's first and current wife, and she's also Bjorn's stepmom. She essentially plays the role of Snape in this story. And then finally, we have Harold, which is the big bad of the story, and we learn more about him as the story goes on. So the story starts with Freya stuck with her asshole husband, Vragi, who just does nothing but treat her like shit. He essentially sees her as nothing but a breeding animal. I know it's fucked up to say like, but that's literally how he sees her. And she, rightfully so, she hates his guts and she wants to escape that life. But she can't because thwarting him would also endanger her family. So she just deals with it and she just stays strong for the sake of her family and friends and loved ones. So Freya's motivations early on, or at least her dreams. She wants to be a warrior. She wants to be on a battlefield with the men just hacking and slashing everyone, which seems a bit like a childish motivation, because she's not doing it like for the sake of protecting her family, but she just wants to be a warrior on the field battling. But fair enough. Okay, so we move on. So then Vragi, her first husband, tricks her into showing her god abilities to Vragi, who is the leader of the village where they live. Before we continue, let me establish something real quick. So Snorri was told a prophecy that if he finds the Shield Maiden, like the daughter of Hlin, and she battles by his side, he will be able to become king of Scotland and just conquer the entire region and rule as a king. So Freya, for all her life, was told by her parents that she's not allowed to showcase her god abilities, which makes sense. That would essentially turn her into a battle slave. So she would just be dragged everywhere, forced to battle, and just conquer lands. So obviously she hides it, but apparently Vragi, her first husband, finds out secretly, and then tricks her into showcasing that ability to Snorri. So Snorri forces her into battle against his son Bjorn in order to force her into using her god abilities and her shield. So she gets pushed and cornered so much that she was actually forced to actually use it. So she calls the name of Hlin, and the shield lights up, deflects the attack, and everyone is shocked. Because of that, Snorri essentially buys Freya from Vragi and forces her to be his wife. That alone is fucked up because, I mean, I don't need to tell you that just buying a wife from another man makes sense. That is just shitty behavior. But then Vragi doesn't have enough. He wants to be more spiteful, so he starts taunting Freya. I'm gonna marry your best friend. I'm gonna make her my breeding wife. And so she, out of desperation, grabs Bjorn's flame axe and just yeets it towards the back of his head and kills him. Because of this, I had different expectations from the story. I thought it was going to be a sort of girl power type story where she plots against her second shitty husband to overpower him, convince the people into following her, overthrow her husband, her becoming a queen, so on and so forth. Something along those lines, which would have been dope to follow. But that is sadly not what happened. We don't get a girl power moment in this book at all. Okay, so early on it was really interesting reading story from Freya's perspective, experiencing her, how she's fueled by both the urge to protect her loved ones, but also a sense of selfishness, which makes perfect sense. She's like a flawed character, but she has her own needs. She wants a life for herself instead of constantly cowering in the shadow of her husband for the sake of protecting her family. So I thought that they were going to build up on those feelings of Freya, like her powering through, putting her second husband Snorri in his place, so on and so forth, to the point where even chapter 6 ended with this statement: "I said nothing as I followed him and Ylva to the great hall, but in my mind was a truth that Snorri had forgotten. Bjorn was unfated, which meant that no matter what the Norns had planned for him, his destiny was his own to weave." And to me, I thought this was okay. So after reading this, I got excited. I said she is going to go on her hero journey, rising up, but nothing comes out of this statement. It does not happen. So this entire Bjorn and Freya being unfated, it doesn't really amount to anything because both of them do nothing but follow the people above them. They just bend over and just do whatever they're told. They don't even attempt to be rebellious at all. The only rebellious thing they did was doing it with each other. That was the only rebellious thing, and that was in secret. Freya has to go through a fake marriage ceremony with Snorri, and then another ceremony to the Temple of the Gods. This journey takes about half of the entire book. And my biggest criticism in this entire section, like the entire first half, is that this journey drags out way too much without any real conflict. I mean, there is conflict, but it's all fake. Like, there are no consequences to that conflict. There is no character development or improvement or downfall or anything. Everything just stays the same after this entire journey. But there is one thing that I really enjoyed, because in that section of their travel to the temple, Bjorn and Freya were forced to go through a cave that was full with draugrs, which are essentially a Nordic version of zombie skeletons. They're the undead, and that was actually an exciting part of the book. It was exciting, it was engaging. The combat was actually really well written, and the final battle, where Bjorn tries to outsmart the king Draugr, or the leader of the Draugr, or whatever he was. He tried to outsmart him, but the king Draugr tries to outsmart him back into a unfair battle, and Bjorn essentially sets up his downfall by playing dirty, which I actually liked. Okay, so you cannot kill Draugrs with regular weapons. You need a weapon of God, which, for example, Bjorn's flame axe. And the conditions of that battle was that Bjorn was not allowed to use the flame axe, which sounds very, very unfair, of course, because it's a shitty situation. It's only Bjorn and Freya, and the entire cave is full of Draugrs, and then there's the big one. So Bjorn and the king Draugr, they start engaging in battle, and Bjorn starts losing because he just, as much as he's hacking and slashing into him, it does nothing. But something really dope happened at the beginning of the fight, because instead of Bjorn deactivating the flame axe, he sets it down on the floor and goes into battle, setting up for Freya to grab it and eat it at him, but without telling her that she's supposed to do that. It was purely based on trust and teamwork, without actually communicating like that. That was actually really dope moments, and Freya being scared and her pushing through that fear of it possibly not working or making the situation worse, but still succeeding afterwards. That was such a good moment. That was really dope. So Freya kills the King Draugr, and they move on. They get out of the cave. So after this section, it is essentially very slowly going downhill. So they get out of the cave, and they start talking and chatting and joking with each other. And then Bjorn makes a joke about having a big dick. And then this strange moment comes out. And then Freya says, I snorted. I'd sooner believe you're hung like Thor himself than that you'd sacrifice a drop of piss to protect the vanity of other men. So my knowledge of Norse mythology is pretty decent. I would even say better than the average person. And I even read Neil Gaiman's book, Norse Mythology. But nowhere do I recall a statement of Thor packing heat, essentially. This is going to be the strangest thing I've Googled so far. No, Thor is not explicitly known or described in Norse mythology for having a big penis. Okay, so it's essentially just the author being freaky like that. Okay, so after this section, there's essentially 4 sections in the story left: the offering to the gods, the return home, revenge against Gnut, which is a minor villain, and the final battle against Harold. So after Freya gets high on shrooms and kills a cow, she has to return to camp, and Ylva creates a protective rune around the camp. Ylva and Bjorn stay in the camp with Freya and go to sleep, while Snorri takes his army and goes to make an alliance with other leaders. So while everyone's asleep in the tent, Ylva suddenly wakes up and leaves the tent. Freya notices, but says nothing. Instead, the first thing she does is starts masturbating, with Bjorn still sleeping in the same tent, which was pretty awkward to read, not gonna lie. And then suddenly, Bjorn also wakes up and goes out of the tent. So Freya freezes because Bjorn woke up as she was doing herself. She doesn't know where anyone is, so she goes out and explores, tries to find any of them, whether it's Bjorn or Ylva. She accidentally finds Harold, the final villain, his camp, and sneaks up on him and tries to listen to what they're plotting. But and apparently it was him talking to a hooded figure, and they were talking something related to Snorri's camp, which meant that there was a traitor among them. So Freya's first instinct is that it's Ylva, because throughout the entire story, Ylva has not been the nicest person to her. She has not been as shitty to her as Snorri, but she was not nice to Freya. And Freya's main reasoning is because she wants her own son, her own biological son, to be king and not Bjorn. Okay, so the next section of the story is they return to the village and they find it completely destroyed because Snorri had the genius idea to take the entire army with them to the temple of the gods. So they come back, the entire village completely destroyed, and then everyone's raging and upset and so on and so forth. There were survivors, not everyone was killed, but the village was just flattened, burned down. Okay, so Snorri's group had a bit of a dilemma because it would take way too long to rebuild the village, and they had to use that time to grow crops and prepare for winter. So Snorri instead has the idea to pull a Hannibal Barca and immediately cross the icy snowy mountains and attack Gnut's city and take it for themselves. Snorri then gives a battle speech, riles up his army, trying to deflect from the fact that it's his fault that his entire village got destroyed, because he took the entire army with him to the temple instead of leaving maybe half of them at the village to protect it. And everyone falls for it, including Freya. And she suddenly shows this weird sense of loyalty for Snorri, despite him doing nothing, absolutely nothing but endanger her life, like brutally, over and over and over again. And from this point of the story, all the way to the end, Freya enters a state of blind rage and horniness, which is 168 pages. So the next 168 pages has two modes, horny and angry, and sometimes both. Also, in this section, Bodil gets introduced, which was my favorite character, which was not that hard because she was essentially the only likable character in the story. And Bodil has the blood of the goddess of truth or something. She can see when people lie or are telling the truth. So Bodil essentially serves as the mentor for Freya. She leads her in combat training that is more suitable for women. She also coaches her and also asks the tough questions, like why Freya refused to tend to her burned hand when it got burned. So Freya burned her hand when she killed her husband and grabbed the flame axe. So before Freya could answer that question, Bodil just answers it herself and says, "I think," she hesitated, "that you believe you deserve the pain." So they start getting a little bit more into that, and it essentially boils down to the fact that Freya feels guilty for killing her husband and is not punished for it. Well, if anyone else had done it, they would have been either just spent life in prison or got executed on the spot. She feels guilty for that, and she decides to punish herself by not tending to her burned hand. So fast forward to the battle, because the entire march to the battlefield is nothing but shitty decisions from Snorri, and Freya having frostbite sex with Bjorn. And no, I will not elaborate on that. They rushed to the battle for the sake of the element of surprise, and it actually worked. They managed to push towards the gates. They were all in like a defensive shield formation, like shields all covered, and they were all like hurled up, shields covering them. And Freya used her spell to like light up all the shields. So any attack that came towards them, whether it was arrows, rocks, or boiling water, it all just deflected. Despite the shields being very effective, there was a lot of pressure from the attacks, and Freya was losing her footing. And it got so bad that she lost her footing and the entire formation collapsed. And then suddenly a child of Thor appears on the top of the walls of the fortress, grabs a lightning bolt and shoots it towards Freya. And Freya, as she was falling down, was not able to deflect it. So instead, Bodil jumps in front of her and takes the hit and dies. So after this moment, Freya enters a state of bloodlusted frenzy, and she just does not stop. While everyone is retreating because the formation broke off, Freya grabs a shield and just starts charging towards the gate. And all Gnut's army needed to do was nothing. They needed to do nothing, because Freya on her own cannot break the gates. She does not have that power. But she was in a fit of rage, not thinking clearly, having most likely being in a tunnel vision state. Her shield just charging towards them. And that child of Thor, he saw Freya deflecting any attack that came towards her. So Again, they needed to do nothing and they would most likely win that war. But instead, that child of Thor grabs a lightning bolt, throws it towards Freya. Freya easily deflects that lightning bolt towards the gate, and it blows open. And I'm like, that is just shitty combat writing, because the fortress was so well defended that the author needed a dumb decision from the enemies in order for Freya to break through, instead of being more creative and having her find a way to open it herself or just regroup and try again. So the gates open and she just rushes in this blinded rage, in this blinded state of rage, and just hacking and slashing through everyone. And while I was reading, I was like, wait, this does not make sense. How is she has no combat experience like that. How is she able to kill this many people? And she was just going, and she did not care. She was attacking anyone she saw, like whether they were fighting or not, whether they have weapons or not, most likely even killing civilians in the process. And only afterwards does it make sense, because apparently Bjorn and the entire army were going through hell to defend Freya from behind. Because apparently the enemies were attacking Freya from behind, and she was in such a fit of rage she did not even notice. And by the time the battle was over, Bjorn stopped her, and she looked around her. She realized what was going on, and she was still angry. She refused to acknowledge her mistakes. It was so annoying. Like, she kept yelling and screaming, and as if Bjorn did something wrong. Meanwhile, all he did was protect her. Okay, so after the battle, they win this war. They take over the fortress. They move in, and then we get the last decent moment of this story, which is actually pretty interesting to read, but at the same time, it was also just shit. Because Freya has a brother. It was established at the beginning of the story, but I didn't mention him because he played no big role. He was absent for most of the story. So her brother had married her best friend, and they both arrived to this fortress, essentially taking advantage of this accomplishment of Freya, like just using her name for wealth. They kicked out a family from a home, took over their home, and it was all weird, but it showcased like how greedy they actually were. And they hid behind the fact that Freya had to obey for the sake of protecting the family, but they were just abusing that. So we enter this section of a brother-sister quarrel, which was, if you have a brother or sister, you know what that's like. But this one was pretty heated, because this was actually serious shit, and it was actually, like I said, it was pretty interesting to read. But then her brother says something so outlandish, like he goes way overboard. Even I was like, yo, they're going way too far. But then Bjorn takes it way too far by interfering, punching him in the face, throwing him down through a table, and just starts pounding down in his face. And he was not stopping. Like, he kept punching and punching and punching. And Freya did nothing. Not because she was shocked, not because she was just startled from what he was doing. No, because she thought he deserved that shit. She let him do that. She was just looking down on him like, you deserve that. And that is just not realistic. There are some family members that I do not fuck with at all. Like, I have not seen them in like ages and ages. But if I were to run into them on the streets and we start like yelling at each other, and my friend was with me, and he just starts pounding on him, no, I'm just grabbing. No, I'm not letting that shit slide. That shit's between us. So what is going through the author's mind that she thinks this would be an appropriate reaction from Freya? Like, it just did not add up at all. So after this, then Ylva suggests that Freya goes to her mom in order to learn more about the goddess Helene. Bjorn accompanies her, and then Freya and her mom have a chat. Freya asks about Helene, and we essentially establish how gods are, how these children of gods are created. So, for example, Bjorn has two biological parents. They conceive Bjorn, but somehow he has the blood of a god, and that can happen through a god actively participating in conceiving the child, or he has just to be there and just like witness it, which is also kind of strange. Freya asks her about how it happened, and her mother explained how her brother was deathly ill, and there was no saving him, and suddenly a goddess appeared at their front door, and the goddess was like, "Let me have sex with you, then I'll save your child," which is already kind of wild. and pretty fucked up, because like imagine as a couple having a child that's on the brink of death, and you're forced into a threesome in order to save him. That's some fucked up shit. But the way she describes it, so the mother says, "Of course we did her bidding," my mother said, and it was I cannot stop laughing. Oh my god, I cannot take this shit seriously. And it was unlike any night I've had before or since. Leaving us both spent, we fell into the deepest slumber. When we woke, the woman was gone, as was your brother. So essentially the mother, who was also like essentially in her deathbed, like very, very old, was like, "Oh, we had the craziest sex that night. It was insane. I've never experienced anything like that. The three of us, we were going at it for hours and hours and hours, and we just collapsed. And when we woke up, your brother was gone. We didn't even notice." So apparently those parents were tricked into having a threesome. The brother did not get better at all, but a second goddess appeared, and she was like, "Give birth to my child, and I will save your son." So they agree. Freya is then born with the power of Helene, and her brother is saved. He gets healed, and then her mother suddenly starts profusely apologizing for the way she's treated her, feeling it's her fault that her daughter is now in this predicament, being forced to carry the power of a god, which I guess makes sense, because her mother says, "I chose your brother over you." Her fingers dug into my shoulders. "Curse you to be the Jarl's weapon." I held my mother against me, our foreheads touching. To have your child chosen to hold a goddess's blood is a privilege none would turn down. Mother, there is nothing to forgive. So it looked like this was building into a very wholesome mother-daughter moment, where they where they understand each other and see where each is coming from, and I guess maybe strengthen their bond. But no, that's not what happened. That is not what happened. Hold up. Okay, so these are the last notes that I made, and this is what's left. So I'm just gonna spitball this, because this is too insane to make notes about, and I'm just gonna spitball and just go from memory. And if you're gonna see me looking down, it means I'm reading from the book directly. Okay, so I'm going to reenact this moment, this interaction between mother and daughter, and how it sounded in my head as I was reading it. "I am so terribly sorry, daughter. I have put you through hell. I forced you to carry the blood of a god. You're living a miserable life because of me. No, mother, I am content. There is nothing to forgive." "Oh yeah? Then why are you fucking your husband's son?" "Pardon?" "Yeah, I can see it in your eyes. You're fucking your husband's son. Why?" "I'm doing no such thing." You liar. Why do you risk our lives by cucking your husband?" I am not. Then stop fucking your husband's son." "No, I will not stop fucking my husband's son, because you're being selfish." "Don't you dare call us selfish, you little whore." Okay, that last one was real. That was actually said. That was not my interpretation of the story. That was just straight up what was said. So they end up on a bad note. Freya essentially says how much she hates her mom, and she and Bjorn returns. And then they encounter another god who can shoot arrows that don't miss. And an arrow gets shot at her mother. Her mother dies, and then Freya once again goes into a blind rage, steals Bjorn's horse, leaves him behind, and rushes back to the fortress. Finds Ylva and just starts pouncing on her, and they get broken up. And Freya just starts accusing Ylva with no real evidence that she's a traitor. And they have this entire integration moment, and Ylva's like crying. I was like, "That was not me. That was not me. I beg of you, husband, please believe me. That was not me." And Freya, "She's lying. She's lying. She's lying." And then Bjorn's like, "Show us proof. Show us that it was her." "The only proof is that she wants her son to be king." And as they're arguing, and it's escalating more and more and more, and it seemed like this was going to be the big climax where everything just falls apart, which I would not have been against. But instead, Harold, the big bad, he attacks the fortress. I was like, "Oh, okay, well that's also an option, I guess." So then Snorri and his army and Freya and Bjorn, they get into battle mode. They start engaging. They engage into battle. And there was the Child of Thor was with Harold this time, also just shooting lightning. As the battle ensued, the battle did not conclude. Instead, Freya and Bjorn take this chance and jump into a river, fall off a waterfall, and just start walking. They got out of there. Everyone thought they were dead, was what they made us believe. But it was just very, very suspicious because throughout this entire story, Freya was doing nothing but accuse Ylva. But everything that Ylva was doing, that Ylva had done that was suspicious, could have been applied to Bjorn too. So throughout this whole time, I was like, wait, there's two of them. Interrogate both. There's two. But Freya was just too horny and too smitten by Bjorn to even consider him being a traitor. So they walk off for hours and hours and hours, and they find this cave with a hot spring pool, I guess. And then we enter a 6-page sex scene. So not a climax through Civil War, not a climax through World War, but a different kind of climax. And I didn't read that entire section because they were going at it, and I was just getting pissed off because this felt so unearned. Like I was like, there's Freya, use your fucking brain. There is something going on here, and you simply do not care. So Freya and Bjorn start going at it for like 6 pages. I just skipped that entire section, and they do some talking, and then they go at it again, I think, for another 3 pages or so. And then finally, the post-nut clarity hits Freya, and she starts asking Bjorn, are you a Skalander or a Norlander? Because I didn't mention it, but apparently Bjorn was... it was established at the beginning of the story, but Bjorn was kidnapped by Harold and has lived in Harold's country for essentially most of his life. There was a section of the story where Bjorn said that he was treated very well by Harold. How Bjorn was never a suspect in Freya's eyes is just beyond me. Because she starts asking him those questions, and Bjorn is like, I am neither. I feel at home nowhere. And she's like, no, answer me. If you don't answer me, I'm going to go back. They're like, no, you cannot go back. And she just keeps pushing him. Are you a Skalander or a Norlander? He's like, it's more complicated than that. And they start yelling at each other, and she walks out angrily, trying to go back to Snorri for whatever fucking reason. And then she bumps into Harold, and then it all makes sense. Because apparently, who would have thought that the person who was kidnapped by someone and was treated very well, presumably, as if it was his own son, would choose the person who was nice to him over the shitty biological dad. So the story ends in a big betrayal. So Harold arrives with his army because Bjorn was a secret agent or a double agent, passing through information to Harold in order to kidnap Freya. Because whoever has Freya under him becomes king of the entire the entire thing. Also, I feel like I need to point it out, but Freya and Bjorn are actually in love with each other. So Bjorn was in love with her and still had it in him to betray her like that. Like he was beating the shit out of anyone who even looked at her wrong. Like he even got slightly violent with her mother when they were having that argument. He punched the shit out of her brother. So he was very protective of her throughout the entire story. And then Harold arrives, and he starts kind of talking about her like she's an object. And Bjorn just cowers, like, come on, don't talk about her like that. And I was reading like, wait, what? Where's that aggressive energy? I get that you're a double agent. I had that possibility in my mind this whole entire time, but like this, you're a bitch. You were just a bitch. Just Bjorn the bitch. Like, just Bjorn is a massive bitch. So the story ends by Harold taking Bjorn and Freya to the land of Harold. And for Freya to find more answers, she accepts. And that's the end of the story. So all in all, this was not great. It had potential at the beginning, but the build-up amounted to nothing, and it just crashed. No joke. Honestly, I would probably give it no higher than a 4 out of 10. I don't know why this story was written like this, and I thought it was over. So at the end of the novel, there's some acknowledgments from the author, like her thanking her family and publisher and that sort of stuff. Nothing crazy. But then on the second page, in the last bit of her acknowledgments, she says, "So many thanks to my amazing friend and assistant, Amy. who was the captain of hashtag Team Freyorn from day one. Okay, but there was no other there were no other people that were potential love interests at all. Freya and Bjorn were the only people who just interacted with each other in a friendly way or in a romantic way. There were like they both neither had any friends whatsoever. So rooting for Bjorn and Freya as a couple, as if it's a hot take. That was just weird. So then she goes on and says, "My readers owe you a debt of gratitude for Bjorn's BVD energy, because you encouraged me to level him up every step of the way. Freya thanks you, and so do I." And I was like, wait, BVD energy? What? And the only thing I could think of was big dick energy, but that made no sense because there's an extra letter. So I Google it, and I end up on Urban Dictionary, and apparently it means big viney dick energy. Not just big dick energy, big viney dick energy. And whoever this Amy is, I mean, no shade. I'm just ranting. None of this is personal. But apparently this editor or assistant, she was the one who was pushing Bjorn to be like this, to be portrayed as this big Giga Chad, only for in the end to cower like a bitch in front of Harold and not protect Freya's dignity. Really? That's the big viney dick energy you want from a man? Okay, so that was I guess my thoughts and review of this story. I will not be reading the second book unless this video somehow gains like a massive audience and people actually really want me to read the second one. Then I will push myself through hell. So if you guys really want me to read the second book, I'll give it a try, but I will not hold back if it's shit. So my next one, I have two options. So I want to do the Mistborn, the first Mistborn book, which I mean, I know nothing about it, but apparently it's a pretty good fantasy novel. Or this one, Murder in the Crooked House. This one I want for a specific reason, because I found this one through Instagram Reels, and apparently there was this page on it, which says, "Challenge to the reader. All the clues are here. Can you solve the case?" So it is a murder mystery, and all the hints are given throughout the book. So I'm really excited for that, and I'm curious if I'm going to be able to solve it before finishing the story. So whichever guy you guys want, let me know. I'm most likely gonna start with Mistborn and then save this for later. Maybe I'll do something different with this one. But yeah, but there is a reason for this video. So I essentially started this journey around 2020. As most of you guys know, I'm a huge One Piece fan. It is by far my favorite story ever. Nothing comes even close. But at the time, One Piece was getting at such a high level of storytelling that I was like, there have to be other stories that are as good as this, right? Trying to find stories that achieve that level of greatness. And I have found some stories, whether it was through video games, through movies, through manga. And the only thing that I haven't tried yet are novels. So this will be my novel journey. I'm not going to stick to fantasy genre only. I just want good storytelling in general. So if you guys have any suggestions, just let me know. So yeah. If you made it all the way to the end, I want to thank you all for joining. I want to thank you all for watching the video. Please help me out by dropping a like on the video and subscribing. So yeah, once again, thank you all for watching. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace out.